because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains.
I like it raw.
Raw. Ooh, baby, I like it raw.
Ooh, baby, I like it raw.
Don't go in the water. A warning from public health experts for weeks in the wake of Hurricanes Irma and Harvey, which left both Texas and Florida strewn with millions of gallons of sewage and virtually covered in bacteria. Now, the words of warning might ring more strongly. Earlier this week, a woman in Texas died from a horrific infection caused by what is commonly called flesh-eating bacteria. The New York Times reported that the woman, 77-year-old Nancy Reed, had previously fallen and broken her arm inside a flooded house in Houston, enabling bacteria from the floodwaters to seep into the wound.
Houston officials are confirming another death from Hurricane Harvey. A 77-year-old woman died from a flesh-eating bacteria that she caught from contaminated floodwaters. Courtney Zubowski has more from Dallas.
77-year-old Nancy Reed died from necrotizing fasciitis, commonly referred to as flesh-eating bacteria. That's according to the Harris County Institute for Forensic Sciences. The serious bacterial skin infection spreads quickly and kills soft tissue in the body.
After Hurricane Katrina, we saw a big uptick in those serious wound infections. So it's one of those infections that we're on the lookout for here after Harvey.
Officials report Reed fell in a residence contaminated by floodwater. While necrotizing fasciitis is rare, Dr. Peter Hotez of Baylor College of Medicine says it's critical to look out for symptoms such as redness or pain, fever, fatigue, nausea, and vomiting if you have an open wound that's been exposed to floodwater or salt water.
With immediate medical attention, you can get prompt antibiotic therapy, also removal of any of the infected tissue, and that can save your life.
Good wound care, like keeping open wounds clean and covered, is key to preventing skin infections. The community is remembering Nancy Reed for her involvement at this education center for adults and children with disabilities.
God has gained an amazing angel. That's what I would say. And we're going to miss her.
Reed is Harris County's 36th death linked to Hurricane Harvey.
To say Nancy Reed loved her community would be an understatement. Those who knew her say she was an avid donor and longtime volunteer, both with her church and several nonprofit organizations. She was heavily involved in one nonprofit in particular, Village Learning and Achievement Center, an educational center for adults and children with disabilities. They say Ms. Reed has been involved with the village for 11 years and attends every fundraising event they sponsor. They say losing her has been and will continue to be very difficult.
God has gained an amazing angel. That's what I would say. And we're going to miss her.
It was difficult for us to learn because we saw her a lot, very often. So at all of our events, and like I said, she would stop by a lot and just drop off things and come and visit.
The center says they hope to dedicate a bench in honor of Nancy Reed. According to the Harris County Institute for Forensic Science, Ms. Reed came in contact with the bacteria in the floodwaters. The CDC says the infection is rare, but if contracted, it can be deadly in a very short amount of time. They say if you think that you have any of the symptoms of necrotizing fasciitis, you should seek medical help immediately. But the symptoms can sometimes be confusing and similar to those of a pulled muscle. The skin may be warm with red or purplish areas of swelling that spread rapidly. Later symptoms can include fever, chills, fatigue, and vomiting. The CDC says since 2010, approximately 700 to 1,100 cases occur each year in the United States. Once again, if you think you have come in contact with the bacteria, seek help immediately.
A man in Galveston, Texas died after becoming infected by flesh-eating bacteria. According to the Galveston County Health District, or GCHD, the 31-year-old Galveston resident went to the hospital on October 10th with a seriously infected wound on his upper left arm. He was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis, a rare bacterial infection that kills soft tissue, and died on October 16th. It's believed he contracted the infection through contact with Hurricane Harvey-related debris or floodwater. The deceased, identified by the Houston Chronicle as Josue Zurita, had been aiding in the restoration of flood-damaged homes in the area. According to CNN, he is the third case of the infection since Harvey made landfall and the second to result in a fatality. While such cases typically don't occur often, the GCHD is advising people take precautions. They include keeping open wounds covered, avoiding contact with natural bodies of water like lakes, rivers, and oceans if you have an open wound or skin infection, and seeking medical attention for redness, swelling, or fever.
A third case of flesh-eating bacteria since Hurricane Harvey. The disease has already killed one person and made another person very sick. Now we're learning about another patient who did not survive. Josh Chapin live in Galveston with this story tonight. Josh?
Len, you really got a feel for the family of Josue Zurita. His funeral was just yesterday. That family told us tonight that after he started feeling something funny in his left arm, something off, he took himself here to UTMB Hospital in Galveston. Sadly, he never made it out alive. Josue Zurita left Mexico 12 years ago for an opportunity to provide for his family, leaving his wife and daughter back home to come to Galveston.
He's a very caring person. He has a lot of friends here in Galveston that love him. Everybody's very sad. He was very young. He was always smiling.
That tonight from Zurita's cousin Anastasio and his wife Brenda.
That's his only family member here in Texas.
Zurita is a carpenter. After Hurricane Harvey, he did demolition work and helped in the rebuilding efforts in Houston.
He was a very, very hard worker.
Yet 2 weeks ago, according to the Galveston County Health District, Zurita went to the hospital with a seriously infected wound on his upper left arm. Doctors diagnosed him with necrotizing fasciitis, also known as flesh-eating bacteria. 6 days later, Zurita died.
The area, the fascia between the muscle and the skin gets an infection. And that's an open space, and so these infections just roar through there very, very quickly. And when that happens, it's very hard to stop it.
News this family still is finding hard to accept.
Everybody loved him. Everybody in the stores from here in Galveston know him.
The health officials know that you're trying to get your life back to normal as quickly as possible, but they urge you to take reasonable precaution when doing so. First, you're going to want to get a tetanus shot. You can do so at the county health department. Also, if you have a wound, clean it as quickly as possible. Also, at the first sign of infection, seek medical help. Also, wear gloves, masks, etc., long sleeves when you're out doing work.
2 months after Hurricane Harvey hit Texas, a 31-year-old man has died after he contracted the rare flesh-eating disease necrotizing fasciitis. Josue Zurita was helping repair several damaged homes before going to the hospital on October 10th with a seriously infected wound on his arm. That's according to the Galveston County Health District. The Galveston County Local Health Authority, Dr. Philip Kaiser, said, it's most likely this person's infection occurred when bacteria from Harvey debris or floodwater entered his body through a wound or cut. He says that bacteria grows between the skin and muscle, killing nerve cells, which can make blood vessels clot. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says since 2010, about 700 to 1,100 cases occur each year in the United States.
Flesh-eating bacteria is a serious and sometimes deadly condition. Also known as necrotizing fasciitis, it can destroy skin, fat, and tissue over muscle in a short period of time. Doctors may need to use x-rays, a CT scan, or an MRI to assess damage to your organs. Several strains of bacteria can cause the infection, with group A strep being the most common. Symptoms include red, swollen, or hot skin, fever, chills, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. You're at high risk if you have a weakened immune system, chronic health issues like diabetes or cancer, cuts or open wounds in the skin that come into contact with ocean water. Prompt treatment is important as soon as symptoms appear. IV antibiotics are the first option, and doctors often have to follow up with surgery to remove dead tissue. it's critical to stop the infection quickly.
When we hear things like flesh-eating bacteria, for normal people, it's pretty scary. This is Dr. Peter Hotez, and you are with Baylor College of Medicine, and this is your specialty.
That's right, that's right. I run a tropical medicine school, one of the only one of its kind, and we set it up in Houston because the Gulf Coast region is particularly susceptible to tropical infections.
So, a lot of us walked through some of that flood water,
right.
And a lot of us got of it in our homes. How are we getting the flesh-eating bacteria? How did that happen for that woman in the Kingwood area?
Well, unfortunately, those floodwaters are a toxic soup. They have lots of potential chemical toxins, but also bacteria as well, and different types of bacteria, including a unique type of bacteria that we have here on the Gulf Coast called Vibrio vulnificus. And what happens is if you have a cut or an open wound on your skin, those bacteria can enter, and they have the ability to invade through the tissues. They produce enzymes that actually destroy the tissues, and then can get access to the bloodstream. Fortunately, overall it's a rare infection, but we've seen this we see about a dozen cases on the Gulf Coast every year, and then there's an uptick during the time of floods and hurricanes. So for instance, more than a dozen years ago, after Katrina, we saw several dozen cases and about 6 deaths from this flesh-eating bacteria. Now, this particular woman, they haven't reported yet, at least publicly, what the bacteria is, but there are several different types that can do it, including ones that are unique to the Gulf Coast.
I know there are a lot of other things that we're going to talk about in this topic, but another thing that I've experienced with the number of people I've talked to since the storm, rashes and things like that. You know, anything that we can do when you look at something and you naturally think the worst, right? Is that something that's quite common as well?
Yeah, certainly you're exposed to all sorts of things in the water. There are things to look out for if you have if you've gotten a cut or a wound that's gotten infected and you see any redness or swelling, or if you have a fever, or if you have flu-like symptoms afterwards, you don't want to wait on this one. This one can progress very rapidly, and you want to seek medical attention.
Well, and so how do you know, though? I mean, you don't want to sort of panic instantly, but I mean, how do you know that it's something that you really need to get checked out versus something that's just going to go away?
So the 3 things, if you have a cut that you know has been exposed to floodwaters, swelling, redness, and pain. Those are kind of the 3 signs. And certainly if you have any kind of fever as well, but swelling, redness, and pain.
I'll tell you what,
are the 3 things to look for.
Okay, makes sense. Do we have some questions? I think some people are wanting to get you to get some questions.
We do have a question. Audrey would like to know, can this bacteria survive out of water?
Generally not. It generally, once it's on a dry surface, it would not last for a very long time.
Okay, another one is, if somebody has been potentially at risk, is there any preventative measures that they should take, or a shot they need, or what do you recommend?
Well, certainly another bacteria that we worry about is the bacteria that causes tetanus.
Sure.
And so you want to make certain that you keep up to date with your tetanus vaccinations. Now, we're not recommending you specifically get vaccinated if you've been exposed to floodwaters, only if you haven't had a tetanus vaccine over the past 10 years if you're an adult. So regardless of whether or not you've been exposed to floodwaters, make sure you're up to date with your tetanus vaccines, also your hepatitis vaccines, and if you have a child, you want to consult with your pediatrician to make sure that your child's up to date with all his shots, all his or her shots.
Okay, we have another question.
Nicole would like to know, is this bacteria contagious?
Generally not. It's generally from exposure from the floodwaters.
Okay, that's a great question. There are actually some other things that you want to talk about as well that kind of Harvey has brought in.
Well, I think the other gift that Harvey brings us is with floodwaters are mosquitoes and mosquito-borne infections. I say gift with a sort of a sarcastic way.
Right.
One of the things that we've learned after floods is you can get a big uptick in West Nile virus infection. So we have West Nile this time of year anyway in Texas, but with the floodwaters, that provides new breeding sites for mosquitoes. So we would expect to see an increase in West Nile. So that's something we're looking out for as well. So again, if you have fever and a rash, you potentially could have West Nile. The problem that we get into with West Nile virus is if you're an older individual, say over the age of 55 or 60, there's a higher likelihood that virus can invade the brain or the central nervous system to cause encephalitis. So we worry, they call it neuroinvasive West Nile virus infection. What's interestingly, a dozen years ago, back with Katrina, what we found is there was a problem with West Nile right after the floods, but also a full year after that. So we'll also have to look at next mosquito season. So right now the mosquitoes are going to start to go down very slowly as we go into October and November, and we think we're out of the woods. But the following mosquito season, we can also see an uptick from West Nile for reasons that we don't entirely understand.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, we have some more questions.
So the point is the consequences of, the health consequences of Harvey are going to be with us for at least a year. And it's hard to even predict, because remember, this is an event of unprecedented size and scope.
Yeah.
So, trying to compare with other hurricanes, this thing is the mother of all hurricanes. We're talking about 30 trillion gallons of water over a pretty large area, extending from Corpus Christi all the way up into Beaumont into Louisiana.
Yeah. All right, I think we have a couple more questions.
Yeah, Isaiah has 2 questions. He wants to know, what would happen if an oil spill hit on land, and is it treatable? I don't know if he worked in the oil area.
Well, perhaps what he's getting at is, the Gulf Coast also has a very high density of oil and gas refineries. And various chemicals are used in the processing of oil, chemicals such as benzene or toluene. So as the floodwaters encroach on those refineries, there's been chemical spills and leakages of things like benzene and toluene. So something else we're going to have to look for over a much longer term is some of those chemicals are carcinogenic, can cause cancer. So we're going to have to see if this event is going to have any long-term effects on cancer rates.
And is it treatable if he was exposed to that on land?
Well, the problem is it's hard to know what it is. One of the things that we're doing at Baylor College of Medicine is we have an environmental health group that's collaborating with another university in Oregon that actually has a bracelet that looks a little bit like this one, which is very spongy-like, and it absorbs the chemicals, and they're going to actually count the number of chemicals that people are actually exposed to. So we're going to learn a lot from this event. But it's going to be with us for a while.
Okay. Anything before we say goodbye? Any more sort of advice or just information you want to pass along post-Harvey?
I think this is a stressful time, and it's good to acknowledge that it's a stressful time, because we haven't really gone into the mental health effects. But we're going to see PTSD. We're going to post-traumatic stress disorder. We're going to see. Don't be surprised if you're feeling depressed or having feelings of anxiety or worry. This is a normal reaction. But if it starts to impair your day-to-day activities, you want to get help from a mental health professional, psychiatrist, or a mental health counselor.
Dr. Hotez from Baylor College of Medicine, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all of you.
Thanks so much for having me.
I turn my collar to the cold and damp when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence.